All right, let's continue our discussion. Okay, so we have just learned the demand curve. So essentially, this demand curve, what does demand curve do? It just shows us the relationship between price of a good and service and a quantity demanded, right? So this is demand curve. Now, I want to emphasize there are two closely related concepts, but they are different. One is change in demand, the other is change in quantity demanded. Okay, now I'm going to, first of all, they are related. And secondly, they are not the same. Now I'm going to use a diagram to show you how they are different. Okay, and what causes the change in either one. So again, so we have quantity on the horizontal line. Okay, so this is our convention, and we have price on the vertical line. Okay, so that's the case for both diagrams. Now on the left-hand side, actually, so in both sides, so we have demand curve, right? So this is a demand curve, this is another demand curve, actually identical. Okay, so what is change in demand? The change in demand is represented by a shift of the curve. Okay, so the curve moved from D1 to D2. Now, how we understand this is a change in demand? So look at a particular price, when price equal to 1. The demand will change from 10 to 15. So this is how we understand this is a change in demand. Given price, the demand will be different. Okay, so this is change in demand. Now let's look at what is a change in quantity demanded. Right, and then in this case, the demand curve will stay there. Right, and however, what is going to change? We are going to move along this line. Right, so we are going to move from, let's say, A to B. The demand itself hasn't changed, but we simply move along this same demand curve. And clearly you can see from the right hand side what caused a change in quantity demanded. The cause is price. So that is the cause to change in quantity demanded. But now let's back to the left hand side. What is the cause of the change in demand? Certainly not the price of the good itself. It's going to cause by stuff other than the price. Because if there's a price change, and then so we are going to move along the line, which is named as change in quantity demanded. All right. Okay. So by the way, so this demand curve is a downward slope, right? So it's a downward slope. And then, so we have a name for this downward slope demand curve. So this is called law of demand. Okay, this is a law. It's like a rule. It's like a principle. It's like underlying rules behind the market. Right, so this is called law of demand. This law of demand says higher the price, lower the quantity demanded. Okay, so you can write here that if price increase, so that's going to reduce the quantity demanded. Okay, so this is the law of demand. Okay, now let's look at the curve again to further understand the shift of the demand curve or change in demand. Okay, so this is, I'm going to explain to you change in demand, not change in quantity demanded. Okay, so this is change in demand. Okay, so I'm going to explain to you two cases. One is a decrease in demand, the other is an increase in demand. Okay, so start with the decrease in demand. So the decrease in demand is a leftward shift. Now I need to explain to you why, if the curve shifts to the left, that means there's a decrease in demand. Okay, so actually there are two ways to understand. So first of all, you should know, so we have a curve from D1 move to D2. Okay, and then so you can see the curve shift to left. But the next I need to explain to you why a curve shift to left means there's a decrease in demand. Right? So there are two ways to understand. Number one, when the quantity demanded fixed at 7, and then so the household is willing to pay $1 instead of 2. So this is under the new demand curve. So this is one way to understand. So meaning there's a lower willingness to pay. So that just reflects the consumers, the desire for these goods is lower, right? So this is one way to understand. Now, the other way to understand that is if the price stay at $1 or the same dollar, same price. Now you can see the quantity demanded will drop from 8 to 7. Okay, and then that's a lower quantity demanded at the same price. Okay, so you can think about this as their affordability, right? So this one is a willingness to buy. This is their affordability. Either way, okay. But in either case, so that is we interpreted that they as a decrease in demand. Okay, or if the curve shift to the left-hand side, and then we say there's a decrease in demand. I want to emphasize the curve shift to the left-hand side or shift to the right-hand side, as we are going to see in the next slides. They are not caused by the price of the goods itself. It will be caused by something other than the price of the goods. All right? So actually, if the price of the goods itself change, and then so we are going to see a move along the curve, which is a change in quantity demanded instead of a change in demand. Okay. Now, on the other hand, or similarly, we can look at increase in demand, right? And then increase in demand will be a rightward shift. And then similarly, so we can look at two different interpretations. One, if we want the quantity demanded sticks to the original number, which is 10. Now you can see the consumer is willing to pay $2 instead of 1. That reflects a greater willingness to pay for the same quantity. Just think about at the beginning of last year, the households or the consumers willing to pay for the face masks more than quadrupled, I guess, in some case, right? So that reflects an increase in demand. But what caused the increase in demand? it's not the price of face mask itself, it's because something else was changing, right? So we will discuss that in a moment. Okay. On the other hand, so we can look at the increase in demand, but look at fixed price. Now the quantity demanded will increase from 10 to 15. Okay, so again, so this may reflect their ability to purchase, their affordability increase, right? Okay, so here I just explained to you two shifts of the curve, either the leftward shift or rightward shift, and then we have different interpretation. Okay, one is the decrease, the other is increase. But again, I want to emphasize throughout the discussion we have in these two slides, the price of the good itself doesn't change. If it is a change in the price itself, and then so we are going to see a shift of the curve, shift along the curve, and we are going to see a change in quantity demanded. Okay. Now it's time for us to understand what can cause the shifts of the demand curve. Either it's a leftward, meaning it's a decrease, or it's a rightward, which means increase in demand. Okay. Now here I'm going to list 5 most common factors that can cause the curve shift to the left or shift to the right. Okay, start with the first one. So there may be a change in the price of related goods and a service. When we look at that, so we may need to look at the nature of related goods. Okay, and this next we are going to look at how change in income affect demand. Okay, and after that, so we're going to look at tests, expectations, and finally the numbers of consumers. Now let's go one by one in details. Start with change in price of related goods. Okay. As I just mentioned, it depends on the nature of the related goods. So here I've given examples for you to understand. Okay. First example, what happens to the demand for travel in Hawaii if the perceived safety cost of traveling to Mexico increases? Okay. What can be the reason behind these changes in safety costs? Like currently, maybe because the COVID-19 is very bad in Mexico, right? Oh, by the way, so here, so when we compare travel in Hawaii versus travel to Mexico, so we are thinking about, or so we are talking about a particular part of Mexico, okay, like a tropical part. Think about Cancun, okay, so that's in northern part of Mexico, close to United States, and it's in a coastal area, right? So that's what we are trying to compare. So in some sense, they have similar features: warm weather, beach, right, and the fine foods. Okay, and then so here ask you if the safety cost of traveling to Mexico increase, how the demand for travel in Hawaii is going to change. Okay, so the reason why we bring them together, as I just explained to you, so in some sense, so you are a little bit indifferent between travel to Hawaii or Mexico, because both provide more or less the same feature: warm weather, beaches, sunshine, right, and beautiful, beautiful sights, right? Tasty food. Okay. So in that sense, they are similar. Okay. And actually, in economics, we call two goods are substitutes. Okay. In a sense, they are pretty much similar. But then, so in terms of demand, we say they are substitutes. If a decrease in price of one leads to a decrease in demand for the other. And how this happens? Now let's go again back to this this example. So they are substitutes. In a non-economic term, it's interpreted as, so you are indifferent between these two choices, right? So they are similar, they provide similar features. Now in terms of economics, so this substitution between travel in Hawaii and travel to Mexico is going to cause an interesting change in demand. Now here, if the safety cost of travel to Mexico increase, so essentially this just interpreted the price of traveling to Mexico is going to increase. Now look at the demand for travel to Mexico. So then the quantity of demanded that travel to Mexico is going to decline because the law of demand, right? So higher the price, let's call it PN. Higher the price, lower demand. Okay, now look at the demand for travel in Hawaii. Given the same price, if the price of Hawaii stay the same, now you can see those consumers who choose to quit their travel to Mexico, they are going to looking for some alternatives. Now they observe the price of traveling to Hawaii has been constant. Then what they're going to do, they're going to shift to Hawaii. So that is going to lead to QD of Hawaii. So that's going to increase. Remember, this is for a fixed price. Even though the price of travel to Hawaii stay constant, but due to the change in demand for travel to Mexico decrease. And then you're going to see the travel to Hawaii is going to increase. But that just leads to a conclusion of increase in demand. Okay, so the increase in demand for travel in Hawaii. And so the reason behind this change is because a travel in Hawaii and travel to Mexico, they are considered as substitute. Right? And so you are kind of indifferent between travel in Hawaii or travel to Mexico. Right? To summarize, we said two goods are substitutes. If a decrease in the price of one leads to a decrease in the demand for the other. But in the example, actually we had is if the increase in the price of one, which is travel to Mexico, leads to an increase in demand for the other, which is travel to Hawaii. Right? So this is first type of change in price of related goods, substitutes. But in reality, so the goods relationship can be different from substitutes. Okay. And then so here we are going to look at example of complements. So now this is different from substitute. Two goods are complement if a decrease in the price of one good leads to an increase in the demand for the other. Or in other words, if the increase in the price leads to a decrease in demand for the other. And here I give you examples, and from the examples you will understand what this means and what caused this change in changes in demand due to change in price of related goods. Okay. So the reason behind this change regarding to complement is because consumers often have to buy goods together. Think about like in the background picture, so the consumer must buy the car and the gasoline is sent all together, right? So if you have a car but you don't purchase the gasoline, and then the car is pretty much useless, except you purchase the car as a collection, right? Right. Okay, so and here's an example. An increase in price of gasoline will decrease the demand for SUV. Why is that? It's because, okay, so the increase in price of the gasoline due to low demand will decrease the demand for gasoline. Now, the demand for gasoline decrease. And because SUV and the gasoline, you must buy all together. And particularly, so the SUV consume a lot of gasoline. So the quantity of gasoline demand, quantity of demand for gasoline decreased due to the change in price of gasoline. So that immediately leads to the quantity demanded for SUV is going to decline, because these two usually you consume all together. Remember here, so we haven't said anything about the price of the SUVs, right? So even the price of SUV stayed the same, but now so you see the demand decreasing, the quantity, sorry, but you observe a decrease in the quantity demanded for SUV. So this means a decline. There's a decrease in demand for SUV, right? Now let's look at next factors. Right? So this is the change in income, and so change in income can affect the demand, but like in the previous slides, it depends on the nature of the goods in question. Right? It is depending on whether we talk about normal goods or we talk about inferior goods, right? Okay, again, so let's just take a quick break, and then so we will continue our discussion.